Well, from today onwards, it's your job to take care of 7 of us. The one standing beyond the open door was my son, whom I hadn't seen for several months. Behind him were his wife and children, standing with large bags. Even though I tried to convey that it was rude to suddenly invade in such large numbers, my son seemed unfazed. His manner of pushing himself in while brushing off my protests was nothing short of terrifying. Why had my son come back? A few months ago, when I criticized my son and his wife for their extravagant spending, my son was the one who called me a greedy old hag and cut off contact. My son, much stronger than me, easily pushed open the door and entered the foyer. There's obviously not enough room for 7 people, right? So. My son extended his arms and firmly grasped my shoulders. Smiling at my wincing from pain, he said, "Once you're done with cleaning and laundry, Mom, you can sleep in the hallway. My name is Mercy, living off a pension at 75, just an ordinary woman. Before marriage, I worked vigorously at a company. Initially, work was enjoyable, and with many women around, there was an understanding of women working overtime. At that time, there was a societal trend of women entering the home upon marriage. However, the company said to me, 'You're doing great work for us, so if possible, we'd like you to stay.' What do you think? It was a fulfilling job, but my husband expressed his wish for me to become a housewife, so I became one upon marriage. I'm also quite skilled at cooking, and by adding a little extra to my usual dishes, I feel like I can make delicious meals like a pro. I've always admired spending time cooking with that extra touch. Becoming a housewife secretly made me happy, thinking, I'll have more time for my hobby of sewing. We only had one child, Neil, but I believe our life as a family of 3 was filled with happy moments. When Neil was young and in the early years of elementary school, I was delighted that he was affectionate. By the time he reached middle school, Neil entered his rebellious phase, distancing himself from me emotionally at times, but he was blessed with good friends. I've heard that the friend he became close to in middle school is still in touch with him. During high school, Neil, influenced by his friends or perhaps thinking about university, focused on his studies. My husband, while holding on to traditional beliefs, cooperatively helped with raising our child, making parenting enjoyable. Blessed with supportive mom friends around me, during times like high school entrance exams and university entrance exams, I had companions to consult with about how to respond to my child, what advice would be best, and what support would help them concentrate on studying. Since my son hadn't saved up for the wedding expenses, I covered most of the costs myself. My husband worked hard and provided for the family, so we never struggled and lived a peaceful life. My hardworking husband, both in his job and with parenting, passed away from illness 5 years ago. Now, I live alone. My income for living comes from my pension and the savings my husband left behind. Using my sewing hobby, I create items and sell them on online marketplaces, earning a small income. With a decent amount of money and no financial worries, besides my hobby, I also volunteer with friends, leading a fulfilling life. Aside from volunteering with friends, we enjoy fun days together, like going out for lunch. My son Neil is now 44 years old. He got married 17 years ago and started a family. His wife, Lisa, is 40 years old. We've known each other since a long time, and I remember she used to have a quiet demeanor back in our student days. But that image changed as our relationship grew longer. Between my sons, they have 3 children. Currently, there's a 14-year-old grandchild, followed by 10 and 8-year-olds. When the grandchildren were small, my son and his wife never really demanded much, and our relationship was good. To ensure I didn't treat her like an unwelcome mother-in-law, I refrained from sudden visits and gave money for celebrations, allowing her to buy whatever she liked. Thanks to that, I thought we maintained a good relationship while keeping a reasonable distance. However, recently, the situation has changed drastically. My daughter-in-law has started demanding gifts for the grandchildren every week and asking for expensive dinners at fancy restaurants almost regularly. While suggesting going out to eat, they don't even make a gesture of taking out their wallets. What's more, they always insist on going to expensive restaurants every single time. But if it were just about the meals, it would have been tolerable. Seeing my grandchildren happily enjoying their food with smiles on their faces made me happy too. Gradually, Lisa started demanding ridiculously expensive accessories that even middle schoolers wouldn't wear. I've known Lisa since my son's high school days, so I know her from way back. During her student days, Lisa was very quiet, neither standing out nor causing any trouble. To see her become so brazen now, I can't help but sigh and think that I misjudged her. She wasn't originally rude, but the moment she felt she could say anything to us, she became domineering. As our relatives got to know her true nature, we gradually distanced ourselves from her. The only reason we still associate with them is that they all have strong personalities. Lisa, who decided I was easy to manipulate, started demanding rings, necklaces, branded wallets, and bags. I once confronted her, asking, "Why do you need such expensive items? These are things only you will use, right?" She insisted that everything was for the children. Starting from the outfit for elementary school PTA meeting to the necessary clothes for class visits. "These clothes can only go with designer name bags," she'd say. But I don't have the luxury to buy designer name bags just for such reasons. When I ignored her requests and brushed them off, she stopped demanding further. Instead, she started aiming for things that were difficult to refuse. She would intrude while I was preparing dinner and say, "Could you make some dishes for our home too?" If I declined, she'd say, "Well, anything will do," and help herself to the fridge, taking away leftovers or just the packs of meat I had recently bought. Strongly trying to stop them, they just laugh it off and say thanks a lot while waving their arms, and then they just leave on their own. Recent behavior of my daughter-in-law makes me wonder if it's normal for her to do such things. While it's common to hear about daughters-in-law being bullied in mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issues, is it normal for me, as a mother-in-law, to be so exhausted? Suddenly visiting our home and then demanding meals for the whole family, how audacious. But despite that, they never come for summer vacation or Christmas. During Christmas, they ask for expensive gifts for the grandchildren, gorge on holiday dishes, and then leave without even greeting other relatives. No matter how many times I've warned them, they just brush it off, like one summer. "I didn't bring enough spending money for kids this year, so I'm asking for it for all the kids." When I confronted them strongly, Neil just looked at me with a sigh, even clicked his tongue. To the granny living alone, who took the time to visit and spend time with the grandkids, what's with that tone? Well, forget it then, I won't contact this unreasonable granny anymore. Who's being unreasonable here? Fine, I won't contact you guys either. Don't ever come back. Lisa didn't even look at us and quickly left with the children. Since then, there haven't been as many frequent phone calls or sudden visits. After that, I got even busier with my hobby of sewing and volunteering, and days without involvement with my son continued. Blessed with friends around, we still had enjoyable and busy days, like regularly going out for lunch. I've stopped contacting my son, and peaceful and calm times have passed. Continuing with my hobby of sewing and maintaining the same frequency of volunteering and lunch with friends, I had a moderately stimulating life, and those days were happy. During volunteering, people would say, "Thanks a lot, Mercy," acknowledging me, which made me very happy. I was originally blessed with many friends and a sociable personality. So it became a daily occurrence for my cell phone to ring with messages from friends. When an email came with a ping, signaling another invitation, and the content was always gentle, I couldn't help but smile. About 3 years into our estrangement, the landline at home rang after a long time. The caller was my son. I immediately blocked his number on my cell phone, but I didn't know how to do that with the landline. Until then, we hadn't received any contact, so I wondered what could be happening now. Answering the phone, I heard my son's voice saying, "Hello, Mom?" Then I faintly heard my daughter-in-law asking from the other end, "Did you get through to my mother?" Apparently, my son and his wife were calling together. Neil didn't ask how I was or even say it had been a while. "I need money," he said without any remorse, just laughing. As I was about to hang up in disbelief, I heard Neil's sighing voice. Actually, Mom, I got fired from my job.
What?
Reacting like that probably wasn't good. Neil must have felt like I was listening because he started rambling quickly. I had a little health issue, and I made some mistakes during that time. I ended up making some pretty big mistakes, and they told me to take responsibility. So, without even a farewell party, I got fired.
I see. That must have been tough. Hang in there.
Honestly, I couldn't find any words other than so what? I can almost predict what my son will say next after losing his job and asking for money. As I was about to abruptly end the conversation and hang up, Neil's desperate voice stopped me. Neil himself seemed to have never expected to be lent money. If money's a problem, then let's live together again.
What?
Mom, think about it. You, me, and the adorable grandkids can live happily together. We'll save on rent. Isn't this what they call mutual support? I'll be in touch again, and I'll need you to clean the house.
Don't be ridiculous. There's no way I could be happy living with you and the grandkids. You're the one who said you wanted to sever ties with me as your mother, and now you're shamelessly flipping the script because you're in trouble. You should be relying on Lisa. Don't count on me.
Unable to stay silent in the face of such selfishness, I raised my voice for the first time in a while. Then, from a distance, I could hear my daughter-in-law's voice. I'm already working full-time. But even with 3 kids, we can't make ends meet, so I want to rely on you, mother-in-law. Don't you have any love for your son and grandchildren?
No, I don't. Living with you would just mean being treated like a maid and having my money drained. I refuse to live together or provide any financial assistance. Don't contact me again.
I slammed the receiver down with a heavy sigh, but the phone immediately started ringing again. Fed up with the incessant ringing, I picked up the receiver between incoming calls. While it meant missing other calls, those with real business would call my cell phone. However, the calls from my son and his wife wouldn't stop. When I put the phone back in the receiver's hands to keep it up, I get a call at a moment's notice. Growing tired of ignoring them, I reached out to a close friend. Then, on a whim, I called my close businessman friend on my cell phone. Hello? Could you tell me how to block calls on a landline? Finally restoring peace, 3 months passed by. The house was mostly tidy, so I was making drawstring patches with my sewing. Suddenly, ding-dong went the doorbell. It was unusual for the doorbell to ring at an unplanned time, so I glanced at the monitor showing the front door. There, I saw the faces of my son and his wife. All that crossed my mind was a bad feeling. If my son and his family come inside, they'll just get in the way. Thinking to shoo them away, I said, I'm busy right now. Please go home. But my son said, don't say that. We've come all this way. We have something important to discuss. Please hear us out, as he gestured towards the back. Not only my son's family, but also Lisa's parents were there. My son, his wife, 3 grandchildren, and Lisa's parents, a total of 7 people, came barging in. And they all had carry-on bags and even large luggage with them. It would be awkward to send away not just my son's family but also Lisa's parents. If I were to turn away guests carrying such large luggage, and if there were any argument at the doorstep, I'd be conscious of the neighbors' gaze. Honestly, I didn't want to let them into the house, but reluctantly, I decided to let them into the guest room. I directed my son, his wife, and Lisa's parents to the guest room while the grandchildren were entertained upstairs. I could hear the grandchildren giggling and saying, "This room is so big." Without consulting me at all, my son blurted out, "Mom, let's live together. Look, we've even brought our stuff," as he gestured at the luggage. Instinctively, I said, living together is out of the question. Take your things and go home. But such a refusal didn't deter my son. He said, "Mom, we're trying to be good children by living together. We want to give you the joy of taking care of your grandchildren in your old age. Isn't that being filial? Me taking care of you?" in a condescending tone. With a sigh of exasperation, I said, "Listen, as you know, I'm 75 years old. It's impossible for me, at my age, to take care of grandchildren." I was disillusioned by how, despite firmly declining over the phone, it seemed as if it never happened. Relying on a son who only thinks of himself is honestly just unnecessary meddling. "Mercy, Neil's got a point. Living together would be easier for you too. You'd be happy seeing your grandkids every day," they insisted. The thought of living with my son's family made me shudder at how much money I would be drained of and how much effort I would have to put in. Even Lisa chimed in, "Considering your age, Mercy, it would be better for you to live with us. You'll have the joy of spending time with your cute grandkids." I had barely spoken to Lisa's parents since our wedding, let alone seen them. Lisa's parents seemed to spoil her as an only child, and she, in turn, seemed to have been raised with that skewed parental affection. Now even Lisa's parents chimed in, saying, "Hey, Mercy, let's cooperate since we're all getting older." Truly typical of Lisa's parents. They must have had a significant influence on her personality. Despite not knowing what kind of life they led, they seemed insistent on echoing Lisa's words. Perhaps feeling empowered by their numbers, Neil joked, "Being the one to give our dear old mom the joy of caring for a lively family in her short twilight years makes me the model son, right?" I couldn't help but wonder if Neil and Lisa were trying to repay me for what I'd done for them all these years. It infuriated me how they seemed to forget that I had been the one covering the expenses for the grandkids, using my money as if it were limitless, all in the name of because Lisa wants it or because Neil needs it. And Lisa's parents seemed to back her every word. "Hey Mercy, our Lisa is a smart girl. Let's go along with what Lisa says," they said, smiling too sweetly. That overly sweet smile started to give me an uneasy feeling. So, I've made sure to avoid getting involved with Lisa's parents. It's precisely because we haven't met since the wedding that their audacity to intervene so boldly now leaves me not just bewildered but feeling downright brazen. Lisa's parents had quite the nerve. "Mom, we're here to stay, and we're going to live together. You'll be happy. Starting today, we'll be living in this house," my son said, grinning. He then continued, "We need your room, so from today, you'll be sleeping in the hallway," he said, dismissing me. To add insult to injury, his wife Lisa joined in with a thin smile, saying, "Please take care of us, mother-in-law." I didn't want to be manipulated any further by my son's family or Lisa's parents. With that thought in mind, I pushed past them and returned to my room upstairs. In just a few minutes, I was ready to leave, carrying my suitcase downstairs, much to the surprise of my son's family and Lisa's parents. "I'm leaving, so do as you please," I said, leaving my son speechless. Neil asked, "But what about the household chores here?" And Lisa panicked, "Yes, exactly, I thought I'd finally be free from chores." Upon hearing those words, I realized they intended to treat me like a maid. The audacity of Neil, who had been fired and had no job, and Lisa, who couldn't cover the family's living expenses with just her part-time job, left me speechless. And Lisa's parents, who came along as a package deal, were clearly too much to handle. I told my son and his wife, "I've already sold this house because managing it alone became too difficult. If you want to live here, you'll need to buy it back." My son and his wife seemed puzzled by what I was saying. Continuing, I said, "Originally, I planned to move from this house and have been preparing for it for the past 3 months." To which my son replied, "But there are still things in this guest room." I continued, "We originally planned to move out of this house and had been preparing for 3 months, to which my son replied, "You have all your things in this guest room." Well, those were meant to be disposed of last. Most of the things here were unnecessary for the new house. What wasn't needed was naturally discarded. What was necessary, I took to the new house, I explained. "If Neil and you want to live here, you'll have to buy back this house." "Well, since it was well maintained and close to the station, it won't be cheap," I added. Since the guest room only had a low table and simple interior, my son didn't seem to notice at all. I had arranged for the removal company to take away all the items in the guest room once I had finished unpacking. so there were only reception items in the guest room. Then the son and his wife came to me and said, "Mom, I'm your precious son. Aren't the kids cute grandchildren to you?" and pleaded with tears. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. To Neil, I said, "My dear sons disappeared 3 years ago. Why are you telling me this now? You should just go back to your home. I'm not obliged to take care of a 44-year-old grown-up son now." Upon hearing that, the son said, "We've already canceled the apartment we were living in. Because without a job, we can't pay the rent. Life is tough with Lisa's income. We have no choice but to rely on you, Mom." Even if they say that, I'm not obliged to support not only my son's family but also Lisa's parents. To my son's words, I retorted, "What are you talking about? It's fine if you find a job, and if Lisa continues her full-time job, you can manage your life. Instead of making excuses for being unemployed, go and find a job. You're the breadwinner, Neil, it's up to you. My child-rearing days are over. There's no obligation to support Neil now." My son also said, "Maybe because I can't find a job right away, you think I'm asking for your help," he said, angry. "Well then, why don't you ask Lisa's parents for help? They are understanding people for Lisa, and it would be easier for Neil to live with them," I said. Lisa said, "Our parents sold their house and came here. We have nowhere else to go. As for me," I said, "this house is no longer mine. If you want it, you'll have to go to a real estate agent and buy it." Seeing the situation of my sons, I thought they really had nowhere else to go. Well, it seems my son and his wife have no home to return to. However, this is not a home for Neil either. I can only say I'm amazed at my son and his wife. I was shocked to realize that they really thought they could live with me without my consent. It's outrageous that Lisa's parents are also coming to live in my house, along with my son and his wife. And then, Lisa's parents also said, "If you're also a parent, isn't it natural to take care of your son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren?" How shameless can Lisa's parents be? But just because of that, I'm not obligated to take care of Lisa's parents. Besides, if you're also parents, why don't you take care of your daughter, son-in-law, and grandchildren? Moreover, Neil and I cut ties 3 years ago. I consider my son already dead. So, I don't want to be relied on now. This house is already sold, and the next one is a one-room apartment. There's no space for you, I said sarcastically and bitterly. Even though I have a volunteering spirit, my heart is not so big as to support my estranged son and his wife. I'm helpless as long as I don't have a home. And for me, living on a pension, there's nothing I can do for Neil and his family. I'm too preoccupied with my own retirement plans. Certainly, our longtime home holds many memories with my husband. Even though it was a better time than now, how hard my husband worked to buy this house. And not only my husband, but also many cherished memories with Neil. Now they are nostalgic memories that bring tears to my eyes. Is it irresponsible as a parent to disown the only son we raised with care? But Neil is already over 40, married, and has 3 children. If parents still have responsibility even in such a case, then surely I must have been wrong in my child rearing. While my heart aches heavily, Neil and his wife are blaming each other. It seems no one had anticipated that I would sell this house under any circumstance. Indeed, it's risky for me, in my 70s, to sell a fully paid-off house. Honestly, if my relationship with Neil and his family hadn't deteriorated, I wouldn't have done such a thing. Seemingly forgetting about me entirely, both Lisa and her parents were furious at their son-in-law Neil. "It's Neil's fault for lying, all the blame lies with Neil," said Lisa's parents, angry. Lisa was furious, saying, "Didn't you confirm with Dad that we would never sell the house full of his memories? Isn't the plan ruined now?" Actually, the landlord of the apartment where my son and his wife lived was a very close friend of mine from a long time ago. Knowing that the landlord of Neil's apartment was a friend, I had been curious since Neil mentioned living together 3 months ago, so I decided to give my friend a call. What I heard from my friend was that, actually, my son had been discussing giving up the apartment for the past 4 months. To be honest, I was dumbfounded by my son's actions, but I was glad to know about their plans beforehand. Furthermore, I learned from my friend, who is also the landlord, that my son had said, "I want to live with mom and let her take care of the kids a little. I want to take care of her while she's still healthy." Knowing this, I prepared various alternatives to avoid living with my son and his family. At my current age of 75, I simply don't have the energy to take care of my endlessly energetic children. And I can foresee being burdened with household chores when my son and his wife come over. Not only that, but I also felt a sense of crisis that if we lived together, I would not only be responsible for taking care of my son and his family but also be financially exploited as their ATM. For about a week, I thought about what kind of environment would be comfortable for me to live in. I considered whether I could live happily while considering my physical capabilities. This house is too big for me to manage living alone. I'm still struggling to manage it even now. After much consideration, I decided to sell this house and move into residential facility for elderly. Since the senior living facility is not as spacious as a standalone house, I had to move out the necessary items. I needed to dispose of things that wouldn't fit into the senior living facility, but with my wide circle of friends, it was easy. I sold items such as furniture, clothes, antiques, and even many books left behind by my late husband to secondhand stores. I donated everything I hadn't used in years and items suitable for the volunteer facilities bazaar, which helped with the organization. I went to the city office and obtained the necessary paperwork for the move and received information about what was needed. I completed most of the moving procedures and preparations 4 days ago. As I finished the remaining procedures for electricity, gas, water, etc., it was a nostalgic moment when I was at the beloved house. Just as I was about to leave the house after bidding it farewell, my son showed up. As I was leaving the house, my grandchildren, who had been playing upstairs, seemed to have overheard my conversation with my son and peeked their heads out. Encouraged by their parents' looks, my grandchildren, especially the 14-year-old, said, "Grandma, abandoning us and Dad like this is heartless." Then he continued, "Grandma should live with us since she's all alone. And she should give all her money to Dad and Mom." Hearing this, my grandchildren, ages 10 and 7, said, "That's right. That's right," and they said it as if their son and his wife had been well educated. Listening to my grandchildren's comments, I couldn't help but wonder where I went wrong in raising my son. However, my choices regarding Neil and Lisa were mine to make. Still, seeing my grandchildren's reactions, I knew they would face challenges in the future, but it was beyond my control and knowledge. In an attempt to reason with my grandchildren, I suggested, "Why don't you ask Lisa's parents for help? There's no need for me to be involved." My son argued, "Lisa's parents have no savings, and they barely scrape by on their pensions. It's impossible for them. Having our family here would ensure you have a good life, Mom." I sighed in exasperation. Neil is an adult. He should find a job while Lisa works part-time. If Lisa works, she could rent an apartment in her name. Neil's old landlord is willing to keep the apartment vacant for a while since we won't be living here. If Lisa's part-time job and Neil's unemployment can secure the house loan, then you can buy back the house, I advised. After leaving the house, I contacted a real estate agent. At my age, I just want to live within my means. Subsequently, it seems my son's family tried to reclaim the house I sold. It seems Neil tried to repurchase the house, which holds memories for him, by visiting a real estate agency. He provided his former family's address and said, "I want to buy this property." Since it's a significant purchase, there's a loan assessment involved. Unfortunately, it seems the loan application, based solely on Lisa's part-time job, didn't pass. With a son who's unemployed, they couldn't even discuss a loan. The house, with its good condition and location, was too expensive to buy back, and it seems Neil's budget couldn't keep up, making it impossible to purchase it with a loan over their budget. Indeed, it was too expensive for an unemployed son and a wife with a part-time job. They persuaded the landlord of the apartment where the family previously lived, accommodating a total of 7 people, including Lisa's parents. While the landlord secured his income, he expressed concerns about avoiding any issues, stating, "Neighborhood disputes are the most troublesome." Despite living on the landlord's goodwill, the apartment feels cramped for 7 people, especially with young children, causing considerable stress. Furthermore, living in a small space with Lisa's parents adds even more stress, leading to frustration in their daily lives. A friend who lives near Neil's apartment informed me that Neil and Lisa are visibly struggling. Although Neil found a full-time job, I heard that his lack of qualifications results in a meager salary. With the money from selling the house, the savings my husband left, and my monthly pension, I can afford a reasonably good elderly-friendly apartment. I enjoy my hobbies like sewing, volunteering, and dining with friends, leading a content life. The environment hasn't changed much, and I feel peaceful and happy. Joining a gateball club after moving to the senior apartment has brought me more enjoyable moments than before. Having more friends from the gateball club makes each day enjoyable. Additionally, I've formed a close bond with a gentleman, adding excitement to my life, making each day feel fresh. I am not thinking of getting married now, but it has been a happy time for me to be of service to someone else. I was happy to be having a good time with someone who is good to me. I hope I can continue to be as energetic and happy as I am now.